All right, thank you, everybody. My name is Richard Roy, and I'm president of the Berlin Board of Ed. I want to welcome you to our board meeting tonight on May 26th. Before we start with our normal Pledge of Allegiance, I would like to just take a moment of silence, if we could, please, for two different groups. One, Memorial Day weekend, all those who lost their lives defending us through the years. I want to make note of that, especially the citizens of Berlin throughout this process. And also the members of our local community who've been taken by COVID. It's been a grueling couple of months for a lot of us. And I would like to share the moment of silence for them, which on an aside also includes my mom, who passed away last week. So if we could do a moment of silence, please, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. If we could get the flag up now for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. It's hard to tell when it's up. Does anybody know? I'm going to assume that we're up. Why don't we start? I'll lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. And again, welcome. Let me get myself set. First on our list today on the agenda is the audience of citizens. And we're going to start off with a topic that's been pushing a lot of emails our way over the weekend. It's been a hot topic in town. And I'm choosing to read only one of the letters, not because it's better than the other letters per se, but they all essentially brought up the same issues over and over again. And we do, I think, have at least a potential resolution. So I would like to read this, however. So the first letter I'm going to read is from Lucy, and I'm going to apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name, Masachi Bantle, the Vice President of the Berlin High School Athletic Boosters, 1510 Chamberlain Highway in Kensington. Dear Mr. Royan, I'm writing this email as a concerned parent of a spring athlete and the Vice President of the Berlin High School Athletic Boosters. It's come to my attention that spring season coaches are not being paid for these spring sports seasons. I'm wondering why this decision was made. Coaches do so much more than coach during scheduled meets or games. They create schedules, schedule buses for away events, make up practice schedules, keep in touch with the athletes, and provide support and workouts prior to the season and after the season ends. In addition, coaches write letters of recommendation and talk to prospective college coaches on behalf of players and runners who have decided to continue their athletic career at a college level. Coaching is not a 10-week job. It is a year-round job. Our coaches deserve to be paid. I respectfully request that the Board of Ed reconsider its decision not to pay our coaches for the spring seasons. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Lucy. I do appreciate the email. And I'd like to start with this topic while it wasn't on the agenda, and normally we don't always reply, but given our current situation, I think that this warrants a reply. So for the people who aren't aware, I did try to summarize it whenever I was responding to people, and I'm pretty sure I replied to everybody who reached out to me. The Board of Education did not come to a unilateral decision not to compensate the coaches. So let's clarify first of all. There's something called, well, we all know that there are contracts that are out there that bind both parties all the time. We have union contracts with every union, 5, 6, 7 different types of unions that we're dealing with on a daily basis. In this particular case, the contracts are only good given consistent circumstances. And in this year, we had very unusual circumstances, thereby changing some of the needs of the contract. So what we do is we create what's called an MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement, where both parties say something's changed. The circumstances behind this contract have changed for a limited amount of time. It's always got an end stamp, an end date on it. For a limited amount of time, we know that we need to redefine the boundaries of this agreement. So in this particular agreement, we left school on March 13th. That was the last day of school. The spring sports season was supposed to begin, I believe, on the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, but I believe pitchers and catchers were supposed to start somewhere around the 20th. There was a mutually binding agreement, a negotiation held between the administration on behalf as agents of the Board of Ed, and the union, the teachers union, which oversees the stipend position. And there are several specific clauses in there that are appropriate and apply to this issue. So here's one of them. Clause 13, other stipends, including spring athletics, shall be paid out of a prorated basis from the date the first session commenced in accordance to the terms within the collective bargaining agreement. And then there is 14, all provisions shall remain in effect until the end of the 1920 school year. So there's our end date. We have to change the agreement because the conditions have changed, but there's a timestamp on it, on the end date. And then clause 16, notwithstanding the foregoing, the board and the association agree they may revisit the terms of this MOA in the future if circumstances related to the COVID-19 health emergency and its impact to the district change or otherwise evolve. We have done quite a bit of work and research over the last few days as this issue has become the hot topic, and we've come to the conclusion that there are extenuating circumstances involved here. And while we're not going to go into the details on those circumstances, nor are we going to put parameters on whatever agreement might be reached, we have requested that Mr. Benigni, the superintendent, reach out to the union representation to determine whether or not the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement, is valid and fair, and whether the conditions that set it apart have evolved, and whether any changes need to be made. So it's not something that we are voting on as a group. We did not come to a conclusion. We did not decide in any meeting in the last several weeks that we weren't going to pay the spring coaches. It was the memorandum that had been drafted back before the season even began that set the parameters for this. But it does allow for an evolution of situation, and we have evolved. Things have happened, and the superintendent hopefully will reach out, and I know the union representation has also reached out, where they'll be able to sit down and say, let's take a look at this and see if it still is valid and fair. It is also important that everybody understand. A lot of people reached out to us and said, well, the other towns are doing this and all the other towns are doing that. They don't have the same MOA. Every town negotiates separate MOAs with all of their unions that are relevant. So ours, while it may mirror some conditions, there are actually 17 different clauses in this, as other towns, they're not exact. The terms are not exact. The wording is not exact. So we have a contract here, and we are bound by it unless there are circumstances that change the conditions. And so that's our recommendation to Brian. And we'll come back and hopefully be able to report something in the future, but that's where we are right now. Secondly, we have another letter. Then the other letters, again, I apologize for all the people that wrote letters about the coaches, but I thought that that one letter did sum up the issue as a whole rather than reading all of them. And I did respond to all of them individually. So now we have a second one from Joanne Beanie, but there's no address here. Hi, my concern is, why isn't there a daily Zoom meeting with teachers and their students? Most children need a classroom setting, even if it's on Zoom. I fear what might happen to most of the Berlin children who are learning from home. They might fall far behind grade level. Teachers are getting paid their normal salary. A few worksheets daily isn't enough. Teachers post the daily assignments and students do the assignments. No interaction between teachers and students. There might be a 2-day Zoom meeting for 1 hour. Not enough. Maybe teachers should only get paid for the hours they spend interacting with their students. This 1 or 2 day Zoom meetings is not acceptable. So I'll leave this either to Aaron or Brian, if you could address the concern, please.
I'd like to start, Brian Benigni, Superintendent. I think it's important to note that as we phased in our distance learning, we moved into the Zoom meetings. And there's also a level of understandings that take place in a home. If there's 3 children at home that need to get online, to do Zoom meetings all day long would not work. It's not best educational practice to have a student at a screen all day long. As we move forward, would we like to do more Zoom meetings? Absolutely. It's not to say that where we are now is where we'd like to be, but we also believe there needs to be flexibility in allowing students to be able to be equitable access for all, and that we're not locking students out. So even with the Zoom meetings that we currently have going on, they're being recorded. So if students can't get on during the live session, they're able to view the recorded session at a later date. And as I said to the board earlier and to the community, we really are working in phases of bringing in distance learning. And the first phase, there wasn't Zoom. This third phase, as I like to call it now, we do have the Zoom live meeting. And the next phase would include more Zoom meetings. But to think that it could be all day long, Zoom meetings, that students would sit in front of a computer screen, for 5-6 hours at a clip, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's best practice. So.
Thank you very much. And by the way, I should have mentioned, we have all of our members here tonight with the exception of Jamie Miller, who wasn't able to make it due to a work conflict tonight, but she did weigh in on some issues. The next letter, there's actually two letters that are very similar, but they raise different points. So I'm going to read both of them, and then if you could address it, please. The first letter is from Kyle Alger, A-L-G-E-R. Again, I don't have an address. I'm submitting this question to the board in advance of Tuesday's meeting. I would like to understand how the Board of Education will address the CDC's coronavirus recommendations for school in the fall, and what, if any, community engagement is planned to create dialogue and solicit contribution to the planning from parents. So before we answer that, I want to read the other letter because it does mention some similar ideas. A little longer, though. From Mrs. Nikki Stambitsky. Again, no address, unfortunately. We have to make that. Oh, no address. Hello, my question for the meeting is, considering the draconian measures that the CDC has just laid out for schools, and also what the Connecticut Board of Education is discussing, how can our children go back to school in a normal fashion without having to live through this unacceptable Orwellian new normal? I have two special needs kids, and their routines were severely broken by the pandemic. They have had to adjust to distance learning, and now we are expecting them to adjust again. Except this time, will it be 6 foot away from friends and teachers with tape on the floors, smaller classrooms, face masks, temperature checks, no recess or eating in the cafeteria, and many other frightening proposed solutions? What can we as parents expect when school does finally open? And how can you ensure that our kids will go back to the normal they knew before the whole situation started? Also, will kids have to be tested regularly for COVID every time they go into school? As a parent, I do not want my children being temperature checked or tested for COVID at all. Thank you.
So to answer the first question, I'm going to also ask Aaron to chime in here. This is superintendent. We have a group of community members, nurses, nursing directors, administrators, Board of Ed members, parents, students on a reopening task force team. We met today for the first time. We are meeting again tomorrow with the Connecticut Center for School Change, leading the discussion with other districts around the state. So as far as we are going to be soliciting input, but I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is we're looking at what is safe, and we're following the CDC guidelines. As much as people may think, as referred to as draconian, the whole idea is safety first. It's been safety first before the COVID-19 outbreak, and safety is paramount. So when we do reopen, safety will be in the forefront, and we will follow the guidelines that the CDC puts forward. And if temperature testing is a requirement by the CDC, then we will temperature test at the time. If it means there's a 6 foot distance, then we will keep the 6 foot distance. We're going to have to follow those guidelines that ensure safety, and it's the safety of all. Safety of students, safety of staff, safety of the bus driver, cafeteria workers. So I think that for the given time period, I can't tell you what it's exactly going to look like. I can share with you that when camps open up this summer, because those guidelines have been published, the camps are going to be much different than they looked in the past. And looking ahead, I would anticipate school looking different at the end of summer when we go back. I also can tell you that the guidelines for summer school have been put out. We intend to have a live summer school in session this summer with those guidelines and parameters, which deal with transportation limitations to class sizes, protective masks, as well as shields being worn by students and staff. But those are the guidelines that the CDC has put forward. Those are the guidelines that the State Department of Education are requiring, and we're going to meet those requirements because first and foremost is safety, and we need to provide a safe environment first. And it is going to be different than it has in the past because it has to be different at this given time. And Aaron, I don't know if you'd like to add anything, Aaron.
I guess this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction. Both Brian and I have been networking with other districts as well as keeping track of what's happening on a state and national level, as well as what some of the international schools have been doing that have already started to reopen. As Brian indicated, it's really complex work. We have a number of issues from basic operations, feeding kids, moving kids, in addition to taking care of the social and emotional wellness of those students and, of course, our academics. The committee does have broad-based membership, including members of our administration, teachers, parents, paraprofessionals, clerical staff, a school custodian, representatives from the nurses. So we've really tried to bring many people to the table to be able to solicit their ideas about how to best move forward.
Thank you. I actually, Erin and Brian, this is Richard Royan again. I'd like you to take out your crystal ball for a moment. I'm not going to ask you to predict what it's going to look like. I know better than that. I'm wondering about a time frame. Like, for example, if we get the word by the end of July, what school is going to look like, does that give us enough time to adequately plan? Do we have a range of, hey, listen, we need 4 weeks or 3 weeks to be able to plan whatever changes are in store?
I would say that, oh, sorry, Brian.
Go ahead, Erin. Go ahead.
This is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. I would say, Rich, we have to be careful what we wish for in that regard, because the sooner that we get guidelines, the more restrictive they are likely to be, because the guidelines will respond to the situation as it exists right now, which is exactly what we're seeing in the summer school guidelines. So while we certainly all want to know as soon as we can what the fall will look like, we also have reason to hope that the restrictions will loosen as the school year approaches. So it may be best case scenario to find out August 15th that the restrictions have lifted significantly by that time and allows us to go back to a more typical school situation.
Thank you very much.
If I could just add to that, Rich, real quick.
Please.
We're going to prepare as if we were going forward today, as Erin said, and if the restrictions are lifted, then we'll slide back. Because if we're not prepared, having a short window of 2 to 3 weeks to prepare may not be enough if the restrictions are not loosened up. So when we start thinking about things, it's going to be thinking about, if it was happening today, this is what we would need to do. And then if this changes, as we know, looking at the phases that the governor put in, phase 1, phase 2 coming up here, and hopefully phase 3, the requirements would change, but some of the pieces may remain. So, in getting the logistics of getting the supplies, if there's any type of changes that must take to the school buildings, designing entrance and exits, there's a litany of things that we need to look at. And I don't think 3 weeks or 2 weeks would be enough to do that. So
I appreciate the candid answers from both of you. Those are excellent points. And I think I'm glad to hear that we're going forward, at least for now, in our heads, as if we are right now, and then sliding back if we need to. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it for Audience of Citizens. The next up on the agenda are committee reports. And actually, before we get to the Finance and Operation Committee, which is the only one listed here, just very briefly, Carrie and I had spoken this morning about just a quick update from the Curriculum Committee, which will be a quick little 10-second. Carrie?
So we spoke about work related to the honors fund that
Carrie, it's very difficult to hear you. It's hard to understand.
So, can you hear me?
Oh, it's quite distorted. I don't know what it is. I know what the answer is, I believe, based on your conversation, so I'll help a little bit, and hopefully we can get your sound fixed. I know that you spoke with Erin this morning about, and Erin, it was regarding the honors challenge, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Erin, would you like to report on what you're to update where we are with the honors challenge for the high school?
Sure. So when we discussed the honors challenge in the fall, one of the commitments that we made was to report back to the curriculum committee as we move forward in the spring. And so I can report back to you now that in speaking with Eileen Eustace today, she let me know that all of the courses that were proposed for honors challenge have sufficient enrollment to run sections in the fall, and that we were able to use part of our February professional learning day to further develop the guidelines for implementing that approach in the fall. As you can imagine, as I communicated to Carrie, the event of the sudden school closing meant that some of the work that we had anticipated doing in the last couple of months was put on hold as we approached some of the other needs in the district. But we have set aside curriculum funds for teachers to work in collaboration this summer to develop those guidelines further. And also, in a twist that we did not expect when we had initially proposed this, to be ensured that guidelines exist, whether we're in a distance learning setup or if we're back in face-to-face learning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So it's good to know that we're still taking measures with what is the normalcy of school, not just everything that have to do with COVID, but also preparing just in case to see where we're going to be. So it's good to know that that new and exciting program will be hopefully getting off the ground in September. Finance and Operations Committee, Matt.
This is Matt Tenza, Board of Education member. I'll keep this relatively brief, but on May the 20th, the Finance and Operations Committee met to discuss really three different areas of the financial situation for the district. The first was where we are with the negotiations for the transportation issue. Number two was where does the district anticipate ending the year relative to surplus versus deficit? And thirdly, we had questions about our food service and how that impacts the district. While there's plenty of other things that are going on, those were the big three agenda items. So let me first state that relative to transportation, we are very, very close to a final number with New Britain Transportation and what the savings to the district will be. Jeff Cugno has done a good job there, and at our next meeting, we'll be able to report all of the final numbers. I don't want to give out any numbers at this point until they are 100% final. Relative to where the district is ending for the year, again, I'm not going to give you end of the year numbers because guess what? They change literally every day. Just the conversation that Mr. Arroyan talked to earlier about the coach issue has an impact on where the end of the year closes. Every day brings us information relative to technology needs, equipment breaking down, and additional expenditures that we have going along the way. But all of our questions and our direction that we want to give the district revolve around what the board has already talked about, and that is we feel it's important that we return funds to the town under the current COVID-19 situation, that if we have significant savings, that we should return a portion to the town and the taxpayers. It's the right thing to do. And number two, making sure that Brian and his team have what they need for financial support for what's going to come in the future. So we are talking about returning dollars to the town and setting aside dollars, if you will, in the 2% account for what might happen in the future and how that would be used. Again, we will be able to give you final numbers at the next meeting because we actually have to vote on them at the next meeting about the returning of them. I can tell you that right now it looks like we will be able to meet both needs. So that's a good thing. The big question for me, not for everybody, has been about food service because we continue to extend it and how it impacts the overall performance of the district. Right now, food service is running at a deficit, which means it would have an impact on our operational budget. But every week that we are issuing out meals to our community gives us an opportunity to close the gap. So again, when I talk to you about, I can't give you the final numbers, it's because they literally change every day. But things are looking good right now. We have another meeting scheduled. I think it's June. So I don't remember. So but we'll be having another meeting prior to this, to our next meeting, so that we have another update for you. I'm going to close it out there.
Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. So we look forward to the June meeting where we'll be having an actual vote on the numbers, and the numbers will go public because they'll be finalized at that point. Because for those of you that don't know,
very close to finalize. So
very close. Okay, I'm sorry.
The year closes June 30th, so we have to make sure that everything's there.
Thank you very much. Personnel matters. Next up, we have 2 administrative resignations. The first one's Kelly Mayo, the assistant principal at Berlin High School. She submitted her letter of resignation, which will be effective June 30th. Do I have a motion? And her letter was in your file, in the Schoology file.
Rich, Tim Oakes, board member, I will move to accept the resignation of Kelly Mayo, assistant principal at Berlin High School, effective June 30th, 2020, and to wish her well in the next step in her career.
Second, anyone? Oh, there we go. Adam seconded. All those in favor, just raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Wish Kelly good luck at her next station in education. Second up, move to accept the resignation. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Jeff Morey, athletic director for the district, has submitted his letter of resignation effective June 30th, 2020. And his letter is also in your packet in Schoology. Do I have a motion for that?
Rich again, Tim Oakes, board member, I will move to accept the resignation of Jeff Morey, athletic director for the district, effective June 30th, 2020, and to wish him well in his future endeavors.
Second. There we go. Adam seconds. All those in favor, raise your hands. Opposed? Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I wish them both well in whatever the next stops in their educational career, if any, they're going to be. All right, thank you. So now the next up, new business. Mr. Benigni, school calendar is on the agenda again. Would you like to address go ahead.
Yes. Yes. I'm sure all of you are aware, as the community is aware, the Berlin Fair, unfortunately, has been canceled for the scheduled weekend of September 18th. Typically, the 18th, schools are closed. We'd like to propose that the 18th become a normal school day, 18th of September, which would then change the last day of school to Friday, the 11th of June, which would be early dismissal day. So we would end on a Friday. At that point, that would be the 181st day.
Do we have a motion? We can have a conversation once we have a motion on the table.
Move to adopt the revised 2020-2021 school calendar as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Tracy. Conversations, questions? Matt?
So I'm in support of this. I'll lead it with that. But Berlin Fair Day has become this sacred day in town. Even though there's not a fair, are we sure there's not going to be community kickback on this?
I don't know if we're sure about that, but the premise behind it was that we've been out of school for a long time. Our hopes are that we're back in school that last week of August, and that to get as many days in, if just in case that, as what's out there, whether it's going to come to fruition or not, that there's going to be, a fall or early winter that we'd have to be out again. So we really wanted to have that day back for education and to have the students in the school. So that was our thought. I'm not saying that, and I'm hope that the public wants their children back in school and being that they've been out for a considerable amount of time.
Okay. And also I would say, and I'll get to somebody else if somebody else has a conversation, but also I just want to reemphasize, this is for 1 year only. This has no impact on future Berlin fairs. When it's reinstated, and we know it will be, that we will go back to probably our normal practices, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does anybody else have comments, questions, opinions they'd like to offer before we have a vote? Tim, Mr. Oakes.
Semi Tim Oakes, board member, related but not to the Berlin Fair. with everything that we've been doing with distance learning for the past couple of months, Brian and Aaron, do you see this, I think we've kind of talked about it a little bit, is opportunistic to never have a snow date again, so to speak, where we will always be able to deliver remote education to sort of make it easier to have that last day of school be what we see on the calendar and never have to worry or not have to worry as much about pushing things forward?
I would hope that we could get to a point where we could do that. Yes. I think as long as that, there's a level of, we're not going to stop the technology for students and for staff. We're already talking about the continuum of training that needs to take place, the consistency issue across the board for consistency by staff members, consistency by students. So I would like to say that I would anticipate us not having snow days and be able to go into this distance learning mode when we can't, get into school for safety reasons.
I would say, this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. I would say, though, that would require some significant changes in practice, including sending Chromebooks home with the students on a daily basis in case we have a day that we're not coming back to school. We've had, so it's not undoable, but it would require some changes in our daily practice to make that a thing.
Thank you. And just so I'm clear, and our viewers are as well, right now, grades 9 to 12 would be normally taking their Chromebooks home, but nobody else would. K to 8, these things are left in school if they have devices, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, opinions? Well, then I have one more, Brian. And I can't remember. I apologize. What's the date that we set for graduation for the end of next year? Does everybody have it in front of them?
I believe it was Friday, June 11th.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. What a coincidence. All right. So that works out well. Anything else before we go to a vote? Okay. In that case, we'll do the hand again. All those in favor, raise your hand. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. And I appreciate that. So, Brian, you're all set. You can get working on next year's calendar. Thank you.
Rich, sorry, just to clarify, so everyone voted to adopt the calendar?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yep. It was 8-0, and then Jamie's absent today. So the last thing is the board workshop. Some of the things that have been hanging in limbo for months because of all the stuff that's been going on. We had conversations back, I think it might have been the last time we actually met together, had conversations about reviewing the board goals, the committee goals. And one of the things that we had said was that we wanted to have the committees set long-term goals. And I know we have at least one committee right now that is set to go, and that's the curriculum committee that put forth an idea. Carrie, I don't know, how bad is the sound on your computer right now? I don't know. You want to give it a shot? No, so we're getting a shake off. And that means I got to find it. I was counting on you. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can find it.
The Community Engagement Committee has also set their goal the last time we met.
Perfect. Do you have it, or are we still?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you read yours while I look for ours for the curriculum committee, and I'll find it. Okay.
So I'm Julia Dennis. I am a board member. Our goal that we worked on at our last committee meeting, it must have been in February or March prior to us not meeting in person, to engage our community through effective communication, utilizing a multitude of means that reach all stakeholders. Current methods: in-person interactions, multimedia, print, social media, and public meetings. And with that, up on our agenda for the next time we meet, which I did, in fact, email Debbie today about getting a meeting, is revisiting the conversation. We've actually had continued conversation about bringing social media and then bringing that to the board to have further discussions.
Thank you. And I think actually that's a really good point, Julia. I think when we set these long-term goals, I think then on a yearly basis, what I'd like to do is what are our short-term goals in order to continue to reinforce this long-term vision? So the idea that that you've set aside, you've set the list of, here are the things that we want to accomplish long term. And this year, or next year, as the case may be, we are going to look at alternative social media, perhaps, if that's what you decide to do. Does anybody have any questions on what Julia read? All right, so Julia, what I'd like you to do, Brian, are we sending these to you?
Yes, send them to me, and I'll get them
Okay.
drafted and then put into the handbooks.
Perfect. So Julia, you send that. And I have the one that Carrie worked on the curriculum committee in front of me. So here it is. The Berlin Board of Education will maintain rigorous performance standards in all areas of curriculum that facilitate independent, critical thinking, and strategic problem solving among students. And it is a change from the way we looked at it before. I like this one better, I'll be honest with you. If you look at the original one, it had to do with each and every student in the school, in the Berlin Public Schools, will achieve established and rigorous performing standards. This is a different slant on it. The Berlin Board of Education will maintain rigorous performance standards in all areas of curriculum that facilitate independent, critical thinking and strategic problem solving among students. And I do believe that this more closely mirrors the district's visions as a whole that we've been outlining over the last year or two. Does anybody have any questions on that? Or feedback? All right, thank you. The third one, finance and operations. I know Matt is not quite ready with that yet. If you want to forward it when you get a chance to talk, you guys have been dealing with numbers for quite a while. So if you want to put some words down for a change and send them to me, and we'll take a look at it, and then we'll forward that to Brian. Brian, Harry, if you could actually forward to Brian yours as well, and so at least 2 or 3 of them are done at this point, and that would take the place of the board goals on page 1 of the handbook. The last piece is about the core values that are currently listed in the handbook. And I'm open to suggestions. In looking at what was sent to us on Schoology, we have the current handbook, of course, and also the mission statement and purpose that we drafted about a year ago when we had our the meeting that we had, the workshop meeting that we did where we drafted all this, the core values, our practices supporting these core values, and then the committees and their purpose. What I would propose, and again, disagree with me, I'm open on this, is that we put that document, at least the top part of that document where it says the core values, personalized pathways for learning, allow students to experience success, and then how our practices support that. We will create opportunities to learn from and with adults who have experienced success in a variety of career fields. These ideas, I would like to see that put into the current handbook, maybe on top of what we now list as core values, because I think it was Tim that pointed out, these things that are listed in the handbook as core values aren't necessarily really the same types of core values. Tim, do you remember that conversation? I think it was you.
Yeah, go on. I think you were painting that picture very well.
It was only 9 months ago, Tim. I think we were talking about the fact that these are more about how we do business as much as anything else. Structures,
as a board,
standards,
I think
protocol.
as a board versus as a district. Yeah.
So I'd be okay with incorporating the mission of the board that we created, replacing that mission, and then the core values of the board that we put in here. Again, I'll read the 3 core values. Personalized pathways for learning allow students to experience success. The second one would be social and emotional learning is critical. Let me start again. Social and emotional learning is critical for the current and future success of our students. And in the third core value, flexible use of resources, for example, time and space, provides opportunities for exploration, reflection, and independence. And the idea that these guiding principles would help us to determine our budget requests, let's say, for next year, or the allocation of resources across the district for next year, in continually being able to tie back to these core values. Thoughts? Anybody? Disagree with me? A better idea? Say I was brilliant? Whatever you want to do. All right, Adam, I saw the smirk. Anybody with a comment, anything?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. I like that. Does anybody else have a better idea? Anybody else have any feedback? All right, then what we're missing then is the one mission statement. We'll get that done. And then we'll be good to go with the handbook and the updates. We did a lot of work a year ago. It really is a shame that we've got knocked off the tracks by several things, and this being a huge one. It's time to get back to the business of governing the schools and providing leadership. All right. And we are concluding our meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There we go. Second?
Second.
There we go. Tim seconds it. All those in favor? All right. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate all of your time tonight. Good night, Berlin.